So at this point, we've all had a couple of evenings with FM21. We've been able to marvel at the new match engine, seeing some lovely new goals, brilliant crisp passing. We've even managed to get ourselves excited about being able to throw water bottles or how quickly the game saves. But there is one question that keeps coming up down in the comments section and over on Twitter that I thought I'd answer in a video. What is XG? Hello folks, welcome back to the channel. I'm Kevin. In today's video, we're going to be having a look at XG in Football Manager 2021, one of the new headline features of the new game. We've had a couple of days to digest it, and we're now going to have a look at what it means and how you can use it in the new game. If you are new to the channel, I make daily Football Manager videos here on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, turn your notifications on so you don't miss out on any of that kind of stuff. If you like this kind of video and want to see more of this, leave a thumbs up as well. That's a good way to communicate with me that you like this kind of content. And we're actually going to be doing this video by having a look at my stream save. I stream on Twitch pretty much every night at the moment during the beta. The details for that are down in the description below. So if you want to see more of this save that we're going to be looking at in this video, head on over to Twitch about 8 PM UK time most nights, and we'll be continuing to play pretty much from this point over there this evening. And of course, I'm talking as if you're already playing Football Manager. I assume you are. I've been playing it for a couple of days. If you aren't on the beta yet and you want immediate access, I also have a link to that down in the description below, where you can get instant access to a copy of the game that includes the beta and be playing it pretty much straight away. It supports the channel too. Win-win stuff. So let's dive in firstly to my definition of XG, and then we'll have a look at how you can apply it in FM21. Now, if you're anything like me, you might not have been familiar with the concept of XG before it was announced for FM21. And as soon as it was announced, I had to go away and find out exactly what it is. Now, I know apparently it appears on Match of the Day and on all that kind of stuff. Regulars to the channel will know I don't really watch all that. I'm very much a lower league guy. And we don't have XG down in the lower leagues, at least not in any of the coverage that I watch. But I went and found out what it actually means. And it's actually quite a cool statistical model based on probabilities to give you an idea of how well your team is performing in a game. It's an abbreviation of expected goals, and it means exactly that. Based on the chances that your team has had or an individual player has had, how many goals based on probability would you expect them to score if they had that chance like multiple times? And it's all based on where the shot is being taken from. So the closer to the goal you are, the higher the expectation that you'd score a goal from there. So if you've got a tap in from 2 yards out, you're probably going to have a higher XG than if you're taking a shot from 30 yards away and it's on a big diagonal. The closer you are to the goal, the less tight the angle is to the goal. There's probably a mathematical word for that. The higher the expectation that you'd score. And this isn't just people having a little bit of a guess. It's based on statistics built up over a number of years to work out what the probabilities of chances being scored in a certain position are based on how often they were scored in the past. So if that 2-yard tap-in is scored 8 times out of 10, for example, then the XG model will put an 80% probability that chances from that exact position will be scored in the future. So that's why the further away you are, the tighter the angle is, the lower your XG is, because the less likely you are to score, because the less goals were scored from there in the past. Depending on the model, it can sometimes take into account the position of potential defenders or goalkeepers that are in the way of you as well. The one that's in Football Manager does take defenders into account, is my understanding. So again, if you're 6 yards out with no defenders in front of you, you're going to have a higher XG than if you're 6 yards out with a defender directly in front of you, because you're obviously less likely to score if there's a defender blocking your path to goal. But one thing XG doesn't take into account is who is in the position, who is taking that shot. So if it was me stood 6 yards out, by the XG model, I've got the same probability of scoring as Harry Kane, for example. And I don't know if you've ever seen me play football, but everybody knows I should have a higher XG than Harry Kane. So if that's the basis for what XG is, it's how likely you are to score a goal based on the position you're in when you have a shot. What does it actually mean? How can we apply it in Football Manager? And for that, we need to jump into the game and have a little look at it. So here we are in my Peterborough save that I've been playing over on Twitch. We're going to have a look at my last 3 games to show you how we can apply XG in games. So you'll see this on the match stats in the game. It will have the XG stat that's updated throughout the game. If we jump into my most recent game at home against Ipswich, a very dull 0-0 draw, this is what you get throughout the game. You get this XG stat updated in the game. It's replaced where we used to have clear-cut chances. That's no longer tracked as a stat in game. You get XG instead. And you can see that in this 0-0 draw, Peterborough versus Ipswich, Peterborough had an XG of 0.56, whereas Ipswich had an XG of 0.10. So just looking at those stats, you can see that Posh had, or Peterborough, if you don't know who Posh are, my team, Posh, we had a higher number of higher quality chances. And if we played this game again 1,000 times, you'd expect us to score 560 goals and Ipswich would only score 100 goals. So we battered them, basically, but didn't win. So we played better than them, but our finishing wasn't great. You can look at the stats just like that, and that's fine. But what the game does for you is this XG match story. And the XG match story, if you expand it, is great, because not only does it give you this chart that shows how your XG changes as the game goes on, so you can see where you've had your big chances, and you can see in this game, Ipswich had an XG of 0 until the beginning of the second half, when they had their first actual chance that could have potentially led to a goal. So we were fully in control of that first half, even though we actually didn't do too great ourselves. And that's reflected in this little description that you get, which is really helpful if you're trying to understand XG. At the end of every game, load up your XG match story and just read this interpretation of the data that you've been given, and pretty soon you won't need the explanation anymore, because the data will start to make sense. So we put out a good performance according to XG, as our total XG was greater than our opponents. You can see that from the graph, you can see that from the numbers. Pleasingly, we had more shots. However, we converted them at a similarly awful rate to Ipswich. We had a similar number of individual high-quality chances to our opponent, which makes sense as there's not much difference in the average shot quality between the team. So although we had more shots, they weren't necessarily better chances. We just had more of them, but both teams weren't converting our chances. So in this game, I think we're blaming our strikers. We had more chances. We didn't convert any of them. Let's blame the strikers. But if we compare that to some of the other recent games, you can see that XG sometimes tells different stories. We've got 2-1 victories here, but XG tells you a completely different version of what happened in these games. So firstly, MK Dons versus Peterborough, an XG of 0.67 for MK Dons, 0.87 for Peterborough. But if we go into the XG match story again, if we just expand that out, you can see that at certain points of the game, MK Dons were actually edging ahead of us on the XG, and it was very, very tight until you got into the 70th minute mark, which coincides, incidentally, with when my substitutions were made. I've gone back too far. So you could interpret that my substitutions, when they came on, can you even get that from this screen? Does it tell me my substitute time? I'm sure there probably is a way to check this. I know, and obviously you'll know for your own games what time your substitutes came on. I know I made a triple substitution on the 70th minute in this game, and you can see from XG that around about the 70th minute, that's when we started to pull ahead. I mean, Milton Keynes did score immediately after, but our XG gap is bigger there than it was at any other point in the game. So I'm taking credit that my substitutions did the trick in this game. But our XG match story, and bearing in mind this is a top of the table clash, MK Dons were top, we were second at the time. We only put out an okay performance according to XG. So the Ipswich one, where we drew 0-0 against the team bottom of the league, that was classed as a good performance because we did outperform them consistently on XG, whereas this one, an away win against top of the league, is only an okay performance. So maybe we got a little bit lucky in this game. We only put out an okay performance according to XG, as our total XG was very similar to our oppositions. You can see that again in the statistics. We had a similar number of shots to MK Dons, however we put them away at a better rate than they did. We had a similar number of individual high quality chances to our opponent, which is a worry as our average shot quality was higher. So it basically came down to we were a little bit more clinical in front of goal than they were. It was a very, very even game. It could have gone either way. This is a game that probably, if you're going to be looking at the fairest result here is probably a draw, but we nicked a win, whereas the Ipswich game we just looked at, we definitely should have won, but because our finishing was worse in that game, it ended up a draw. And then we can have a look at our third result that we're going to look at for this one, another 2-1 win, this one at home, and you can see on this one, very different story again on the XG. Ours is 1.78 to theirs at 0.25, and the match story, again, reflecting exactly that. Look at the state of that graph. We put out a fantastic performance according to XG, with an XG total that was far greater than our opponents. We had more shots, however, disappointingly, we didn't convert them as well as Rochdale did. We had more individual high-quality chances, even though our average shot quality was similar to our opponents, which is very good to see. So in this one, we absolutely dominated the game, loads and loads of chances, but Rochdale were actually more clinical with the basically one decent chance that they got, and they did score it. And although, I mean, we should have won this game 4, 5, 6-0. We absolutely dominate. I mean, XG says we should have won it 1.78 to 0.25. So I may be exaggerating a little bit when I say 4, 5, 6-0, but we dominated the game. We were very, very comfortable. And it's a very, very different performance to the performance against MK Dons, but the result is exactly the same. And over time, if you're tracking these XGs and paying attention to this as the game goes on, it's possible to start noticing changes in form before they necessarily start being reflected in results, because we all know in football you can get a little bit lucky for a little while, or you can have a striker who's in particularly good form. A really, really top level striker for your team will often have a statistic, will often exceed their personal XG. So a real top tier striker will score more goals than probability dictates they should, because that's why they're an absolute top tier striker. So if you've got one of the best strikers in the league, it can definitely paper over cracks in the rest of the team, and we all know that from watching football anyway. And I think that's the thing with XG, really. It's a way of representing in statistics and in probability that kind of instinctive feel that you get when watching a football match. You know what the fair result was just by watching the flow of the game and watching the game unfold. And XG is just a way of representing that using statistics. In real life football, there's a lot of people who really don't put a lot of faith in XG and would rather just watch the game and judge it the way they traditionally would. And I completely get that. Like I say, I'm a lower league football fan. XG in real football, not interested. But in Football Manager, often we're not watching very much of the game. I personally watch on key highlights, like I know a lot of you do. And if you're only watching the game on key highlights, you're watching tiny little snippets of what's actually gone on, and all you're seeing is the good chances. An XG allows you to kind of fill in those gaps and get that feel for the rest of the game, to get an idea of how well your team is playing. And I think that's a fantastic thing that has been missing from Football Manager for a long, long time. We know how broken the clear-cut chances statistic has been in recent years, and certainly in FM20 it was effectively meaningless as a metric for working out who the better team in a game was. XG has brought it straight back into focus though, and I think it really does make a difference in letting you know how well your team is actually playing, even if they don't necessarily get the result that you want. For example, if we jump back into the Peterborough save that we were just looking at, with that Ipswich game, that was a home draw against the bottom of the league team. It's not a good result, but we can see that we played well, and on another day we might have got lucky. So because of that and the form that we were in leading into it, I'm not necessarily going to panic and make loads of changes off the back of that one result, which in isolation might have done before. And that concludes my whistle-stop tour to XG in Football Manager. Hopefully that's helped you understand it a little bit better than maybe you did before, or how to apply it in game a little bit better to help you with your gameplay. Let me know down in the comments what you think. Has that actually helped? Do you still have more questions? And if there's any other elements of Football Manager 2021 that you'd like me to go into in detail and give my thoughts on and explanation on, let me know down in the comments below. I've never really done a video like this before, but like I say, it's been requested a lot this week, so I thought I'd better get out there and do it for you. If you have enjoyed it, please make sure you leave a nice big thumbs up on there for me. Subscribe to the channel for daily Football Manager videos, including the continuation of the Leicester series at 4 PM today here on the channel, and like I say, daily Twitch streams at the moment too. And thank you very much for watching.